Have you ever been fined $50 just because the grass in your yard was 3.3 inches tall? And then the next morning, someone parked an SUV right across your driveway, claiming your mailbox color didn't match the neighborhood palette? It might sound ridiculous, even funny, but that's exactly what happened to me not long ago. A hidden control system, an underground HOA machine with concealed cameras, rules that change week to week, and law enforcers wearing uniforms, held together with double-sided tape. What they didn't realize, though, was that the man they were trying to intimidate just so happened to be the county sheriff. I didn't need to yell back. All I needed was a case file and the truth laid bare. If you're drawn to real-life stories that feel like a movie, where an ordinary man dares to stand up against a system that hides behind layers of absurd authority, then don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next story, and share. If you've ever felt powerless in the face of rules that make no sense at all. I used to think that after 3 decades as a police officer, no piece of paper could make me furrow my brow. Until that morning. There it was, an orange notice, bright and deliberate, tucked neatly into my front door handle like a pat on the shoulder from someone too timid to knock. I pulled it down, read it once, then again to be sure. Fine. $50. Violation of grass height regulation exceeds 3 inches. I looked out at my front lawn, freshly trimmed just 3 days earlier, using a laser-guided tool accurate to the decimal. I remeasured immediately. 3.3 inches. But according to the official HOA guidelines, the limit was clearly 4 inches. So where did the number 3 come from? The answer was at the bottom of the notice. Karen Mitchell, newly elected HOA president, less than a month into the role. Karen is the kind of person you'll find in just about any suburban neighborhood. Cream-colored blazer, clipboard in hand, walking like she's reviewing a battalion. But there was a difference here. Karen didn't inspect. Karen hunted. She updated the rules through brief app notifications on the neighborhood platform, changing mailbox colors, permissible walkway tiles, even the number of times you were allowed to water your lawn per week. And her targets? Very specific. The busy ones. Night shift nurses, firefighters, teachers, people who didn't have time to check their grass height every single week. I'm not the kind of man to overreact to petty things, but sometimes it's the petty things that are the first cracks in something much bigger. And in this case, it started with a ticket and a blocked gate. I figured that the $50 citation would fade into oblivion soon enough. But the HOA clearly wasn't used to being ignored so easily. On Wednesday morning, I opened my garage door and saw a gray SUV parked directly across my driveway, nose aimed straight at my front door, like a silent declaration of war. The words, HOA Community Safety Patrol, were slapped diagonally across the door, just askew enough to fool the inattentive into thinking it was official. A man stepped out, wearing a dark blue button-down shirt with a logo that looked like it had been slapped on with a cheap decal. He handed me a notice. I was now in violation of a new regulation. Mailbox color does not comply with neighborhood palette standards. I glanced at my mailbox. Glossy black. The same as it had been for the past 10 years. No chipping paint, no damage, and fully compliant with the official HOA handbook, if you still believed in black ink on white paper. But what caught my attention wasn't the mailbox. It was the SUV's license plate, not registered in the HOA's database, and the security officer's name tag, stuck to his shirt with double-sided tape. I didn't react, just took a few photos, logged the time. Sometimes silence isn't submission, it's professional evidence gathering. That evening, I pulled up the county tax office's business filings. One name stood out: Patriot Neighborhood Enforcement, LLC. Established just under 6 weeks ago. Legal representative, Joshua Mitchell, Karen's younger brother. This wasn't about grass or mailboxes anymore. This was a systematic racket, a profit model built on new rules, part-time enforcers, and counterfeit uniforms used to spread fear and extract money from those too busy to push back. Teachers, firefighters, nurses, and one man whose real identity they had no idea who the chief of police was. At first, I thought I was the only one getting special treatment, but then I started hearing whispers from neighbors about new cameras suddenly appearing around the neighborhood, mounted on street lamps, pointed directly at front doors without a single notice. When I checked for myself, it was true. One of them was aimed squarely at my backyard, where I sit and read every afternoon. No warning signs, no written consent, nothing in the HOA bylaws mentioning 24/7 surveillance. I called the HOA office to ask. Karen answered, her voice as sweet as artificial sugar. "We just want to keep the community safe." Safe? Hard to feel that way when I saw 3 of their security SUVs parked across the entrance to the south gate, the very access point used by fire trucks and ambulances when emergencies come in from the main road. I spoke with the local fire department. They confirmed. They'd already been delayed twice because HOA vehicles were blocking the path. While reviewing irregular expenses in the HOA's budget, I uncovered something unexpected. Karen Mitchell was running a home daycare out of her own residence with more than 8 children in daily attendance, exceeding the legal limit under state law. No registration, no license, no safety inspection. Yet there it was, a little sign in front of her house. Mitchell Early Learning Center, nurturing a better generation. The irony was thick. The same woman penalizing neighbors over mailbox colors was herself ignoring the law in her own backyard. I no longer had to speculate. Karen's HOA wasn't just a civic association anymore. It was becoming a shadow government, with cameras, enforcers, arbitrary fines, and no one keeping it in check. I knew this had gone beyond a dispute over weeds the moment the neighborhood newsletter appeared in my mailbox that Monday morning, folded neatly like a wartime flyer. Right on the front page, beneath a photo of Karen Mitchell smiling next to a freshly paved brick walkway, was the bold headline: "Even the police must follow neighborhood rules." No names were needed. Everyone knew who she was referring to. Below that were excerpts from resident feedback, describing me as someone entitled, someone attempting to manipulate internal processes through professional authority. Things began to split clearly down 2 paths. One group of neighbors, mostly those who'd never been fined, started whispering that I was making a big deal, that I was taking it personally. Some stopped greeting me like they used to. Others looked the other way when I walked past their yard. The other group, those who'd received citations for absurd reasons like aesthetically unpleasing tomato plants, or children's shoes left on the porch for more than 24 hours, gave me glances. But that's all they gave. No words. No one wanted to cross Karen and her security team. I didn't retaliate. I didn't post a defense. I didn't show up to argue at the next meeting. I just did what I'd been trained to do all my life. Observe, take notes, gather evidence, detail by detail. Because I knew this much: truth is like a siren in the night. When it sounds, everyone is forced to listen. I used to think that for a community to rise up it would take a hearing, a major lawsuit, or at the very least an irrefutable piece of evidence. But sometimes, all it takes is a single sheet of paper and a box of colored pencils. It all began with a boy named Eli, 8 years old, who lived 2 blocks down from me. His family had just received a $120 fine from the HOA. The reason? A garden hose left on the lawn past curfew hours, even though they had just put out a grass fire caused by the dry weather. A few days later, I saw Eli's drawing shared in a local social media group. In it, he'd drawn a house engulfed in smoke, a fire truck stuck outside a locked gate, and in the middle stood Eli himself, inside the yard, wide-eyed, with a scrawled caption underneath. "If my house is on fire, who will come save me when the gate is locked?" Just because the bricks are the wrong color. It wasn't a powerful speech. It wasn't a political statement. It was a heartbreaking plea from a child, one everyone knew was telling the truth. The drawing spread quickly, beyond the neighborhood into parenting groups, teachers' forums, even the local news. And then something strange happened. People who had once stayed silent began to speak. People who feared being fined started to share. People who thought they were alone realized they were the majority. Eli didn't know he had done something extraordinary. But sometimes the simplest question becomes the most undeniable accusation. And that little boy, with a pencil and a question, did what I, with a badge and a legal file, hadn't yet been able to do. He made the whole community start to listen. That night I showed up to the HOA meeting with a leather briefcase and polished shoes, not out of formality, but because I knew every eye would be on me the moment I stood up. Karen Mitchell was preparing for a major vote to approve a revised bylaw allowing the HOA to upgrade its semi-professional security force, essentially giving the neighborhood patrol the authority to inspect homes, issue citations, and even order residents to vacate community safety violation zones. Karen stood at the center of the room, that familiar manufactured smile on her face. But before she could finish her opening remarks, I rose. "Before we vote," I said, "I'd like to speak, officially." A few heads turned. Chairs shifted quietly. Karen frowned, about to interrupt, but I continued. "My name is Andrew Carnegie. I'm not just a resident of this neighborhood. I am the sheriff of Harrison County." No gavel was needed. No one gasped. The room fell utterly silent, just as I'd planned. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents, each page numbered, annotated, and verified by the district attorney's office. I began with what most assumed was benign, the HOA's private security company. An entity named Patriot Neighborhood Enforcement, LLC, was incorporated just 5 days after Karen took office as HOA president. The registered owner? Joshua Mitchell, her younger brother. They operated without a license, without certification, without formal training, yet wore police-style uniforms, carried fake printed badges, and had already been involved in at least 6 incidents of impersonating law enforcement. Then I moved to the second section, surveillance. 17 cameras had been installed throughout the neighborhood, 7 of which were aimed directly at residents' windows or backyards, without any formal notice or community vote. The data was unencrypted, and the entire system could be accessed through a single admin account, controlled solely by Karen. A direct violation of Section 42, Clause C of the Residential Privacy Act. Next, I placed medical documents on the table. 3 emergency calls delayed due to HOA patrol vehicles blocking critical access roads. 1 case involved a heart attack. Emergency response was delayed by nearly 10 minutes. The recorded reason: area under control of local security unit. And then came the final section: finances. 4 contracts, each for landscape improvements, totaling over $60,000, awarded to a company called Green Touch Services. No bidding process, no competing quotes. Ownership records traced the company back to an entity with direct financial ties to Westlake Advisory, where Karen Mitchell is a principal shareholder. In other words, she made the rules, approved the budget, and signed the contracts for herself. I spoke slowly. No raised voice, no repetition. My words weren't inflammatory, just undeniable. I wasn't telling a story. I was peeling back layers of paper, showing everyone the rot at the core of the system they thought was protecting them. Karen stood still. She didn't interrupt, didn't look at me. Perhaps she was hoping someone, anyone, in the room would defend her. But no one did. For the first time, Not even a forced smile greeted her words. I closed the folder and looked around the room. "Well then," I said, "shall we begin the vote?" And this time, everyone truly listened. I used to think that if a system ever collapsed, it would come with shouting, resistance, or at least a bitter farewell speech from the person in charge. But no. When Karen Mitchell fell, she didn't say a word. That meeting, after I laid out all the evidence, no one needed further explanation. Everything was clearer than the white picket fences she once forced residents to repaint in the name of uniformity. And as if someone had flipped a switch, a wave of public response began to spread beyond the borders of our neighborhood. Eli's drawing continued to circulate, but this time it was accompanied by local news segments, investigative articles, and hashtags from civil rights groups. # right to live. # not just lawn care. # Karen exposed. Parents, teachers, veterans, even independent journalists began arriving in our neighborhood. Not to report, to witness what this community would choose. And we chose an immediate recall vote, proposed on the spot. According to the bylaws, if over 60% of residents signed an agreement, the decision could be enacted immediately. No need to wait for the next quarter. In the end, we reached 89%. Karen sat frozen in her chair, her hands gripping the edge of the table, her eyes avoiding everyone in the room. No tears, no outrage, only something I had seen many times in criminal courtrooms, the look of someone who finally understands the truth, but far too late to change it. No one forced her to speak. She simply stood, gathered the documents from the leather case that had once roamed the neighborhood like a symbol of authority, and walked out of the room without looking back. 3 days later, the residents held a community renewal gathering. There were candles, there was cake, there were handmade signs with children's handwriting that read, "Welcome to the free neighborhood." Everyone was invited, except one. I never wanted to lead this neighborhood. Not while wearing the sheriff's badge, not while trying to regrow the sun-scorched patch of grass in front of my porch. And especially not when I know that power, even under the name of community, always needs someone clear-headed enough to say no to it. After the vote to remove Karen, many asked if I would run for the new HOA board. I declined, plain and simple. I didn't come here to replace one Karen with another, just wearing a softer smile. I came here to open a space where others could step in and find their voice. I proposed an interim election committee, unaffiliated with the former board. People who had once feared being fined for planting the wrong color flowers now volunteered to count ballots. A single mother, once threatened with a lawsuit by Karen because her child rode a scooter on the sidewalk, was nominated for president. And she won, with the highest number of votes in this HOA's history. The remarkable part wasn't the result. It was the silence, gone. People who used to offer nothing more than a polite smile when passing one another now began to talk, really talk. Residents sat together not to complain, but to ask, what do we need? What can we do for each other? Do we even need all these rules? No one shouted. No one gave orders. Every decision came only after everyone had been heard, long enough. The children, many of whom had once been punished indirectly under playground safety codes, were now handed sidewalk chalk. They drew the new borders of the neighborhood themselves, hopscotch grids, dragons, flowers 3 times their size. No one wiped them away at sunset. No one said, "Hot pink lowers property value." A boy passed by my house and whispered to his mother, "That's the man who opened the gate, Mom." I chuckled, quietly, because he was right, but not in the way Karen once understood the word gate. Karen believed that control meant keeping the lock tight. I've come to learn that sometimes the only thing you need to protect a community is to open the gate, sit down beside it, and listen. Every evening I sit on that old wooden chair, tea in hand, watching the neighborhood.